Hi there, everyone. My name is Max Young. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of Vroman's Bookstore to our virtual event tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Tonight, we're lucky to have with us Gail Tsukiyama, who will be in conversation with Mary. And if you'd like to support us and Gail and Mary, you can go ahead and purchase their books from the store. We have Gail's featured book tonight down by that green button below. You can go ahead and click it and purchase it from our website. And this event also includes a Q&A portion. So if you'd like to ask Gail or Mary questions, you can go ahead and click the Ask a Question button towards the bottom, and we'll get to that about 30 to 40 minutes. So go ahead and introduce our two guests for tonight. Born to a Chinese mother and a Japanese father in San Francisco, Gail Tsukiyama is the author of multiple incredible novels, including Dreaming Language of Threads, The Samurai's Garden, Night of Many Dreams. And with her, Mary Roach is the author of also numerous fantastic novels, including Grunt, Packing for Mars, Bonk, Spook, and Stiff. Her writing has appeared in journals such as Outwired, National Geographic, and the New York Times Magazine. I will
Okay.
And this now.
I missed the last bit there. Okay.
I think we've lost Max.
We've lost Max. Okay. All right.
So let's just jump in, Mary.
What?
Let's just jump in. Start.
Hello, everyone out there. Hello, hello. Hello from my bedroom. And look, I'm bouncing.
You're actually on the bed, I see.
I'm actually on the bed. So I like it here because the light is high contrast and it hides my wrinkles. So anyway, sorry, we're supposed to talk about your book. Okay, Gail Tsukiyama is a dear friend of mine and an unbelievably talented novelist. And we've known each other for some time. We don't have to get into all that, but I want to maybe later. Gail, if you know Gail's work, you know that a lot of the novels are set in Asia, in Japan. Two of my favorites are Street of a Thousand Blossoms and Samurai's Garden. And this book, The Color of Air, is not set in Asia. This is set on the Big Island of Hawaii. I just wondered how. And the setting is the sugarcane plantations. I wondered how you came to be writing about
out of Asia. How'd you
get out of Asia?
Well, as you know, I'm half Chinese, half Japanese. Chinese on my mother's side from Hong Kong, Japanese on my father's side from Hawaii. And I've, for some reason, born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, all the books have taken place in one place or another. A lot of the books are Chinese culture and the other books are the Japanese culture. My very first book was Women of the Silk, and it was about China. And the second book was The Samurai's Garden. And The Samurai's Garden was what I thought was learning about what it meant to be Japanese, because I didn't grow up Japanese. We actually grew up in the Chinese culture because my mom was from Hong Kong. So we celebrated all the Chinese festivals and the, celebrations, Chinese New Year, ate Chinese, all those kind of things. Whereas the Japanese culture was more contained to visiting Hawaii a lot because my father's family is from there and he was there originally. So, the Chinese books, the books that were set in China were in some ways different from the ones that I set in Japan, because with the China ones, I had the culture, but the Japanese one, I had to learn about the cultures. So it kind of ping pong back and forth throughout my entire writing career. And I've just thought for this particular book, it was time to move in a slightly different direction. I've been to Hawaii many times because my father was raised there and we still have relatives there. I've always loved it in the sense of the environmental parts of it. and wanted to spend a little time just kind of exploring it a little more and culturally trying to find out what makes me Hawaiian. You know, I mean, I think every book that I've written was kind of an exploration of who I am and how I got here and all those things that you think about when you're sitting down to write a long piece. But with Hawaii, it was so much actually handed to me in the platter because it's naturally so beautiful. So when you're writing, you know, it's easy to write about Hawaii. And
was your father's family, were they involved in the sugarcane plantation work?
No, not at all. Actually, they were all in Oahu, and my father's family was all in law. So it has nothing to do in terms of the plantation work. But what got me to write about this particular book was this desire to try to figure out how the Hawaii that we know today, when we go on vacation, when we go to Hawaii, it's this blended community of, you know, Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, Puerto Ricans, Portuguese. And that was my major seed of thought. How did it become the Hawaii that we see today? Right. So different from other parts of the US. When you go to Hawaii, you almost feel like you're in a different country culturally. Right. Because there are so many Asian cultures and there are so many things that were brought over. So as a writer, I'm thinking, okay, now how did it become the Hawaii it has become? So you go back and you start researching, which Mary knows a way lot about. And I had gone back to the part where I realized that all these people started immigrating because of the plantations. Right. So it's in the mid to late 1800s when all these workers started coming in. They were cheap labor. They came from all the different areas that I had talked about. First the Chinese, then the Japanese, and then the Filipinos and the Puerto Ricans, and they all became a kind of subculture within the culture. And the irony is, you know, the sugar plantations are gone now. in Hawaii. But this blended community of people that make up Hawaii are still there.
Yeah, I hadn't realized the role that the plantation workers played. I hadn't realized. I mean, they were brought over on a kind of a bait and switch. I mean, they were told you'll get land, you'll get taken care of, you'll be paid well, and then when they were there was no way to leave. So they were essentially like indentured servants or almost slaves in a way.
Exactly. And, you know, so, I mean, I thought, okay, you have all this information. What are you going to do with it now? Who do you want to write about? You know, how are you going to do it? And you know, that's the thought of a fiction writer when you're sitting down and you're thinking, I've got all this research. I know how they got there. Who are your main characters? What stories do they have to tell? And how are you going to tell it?
A lot of your books are historical. I mean, there's a historical setting. There's a tremendous amount of information and fact and history. And I think this is something as a nonfiction writer, more and more, in speaking to novelists, I've come to realize people who write novels, particularly historical fiction, but really all novels do a tremendous amount of research, and not just looking stuff up or going to an archive, but in fact, going to the place. I mean, your book, particularly The Color of Air, you're describing the smells of the sea, the smells of the fruits and the blossoms and the earth, the soil, the feeling of the air and the lava and the smoke. And I don't think you can really do that without having been in that place. And that makes your books so rich. But I wondered if we could talk a little bit about research and the way that you do it and the importance of it. Because without that kind of research, you just don't have the richness of detail, I think.
Well, you know, I mean, it's not hard to say I'm going to write a book about Hawaii so I can go back and research. That's one of the places. That was kind of from the get-go thinking, oh, I would love to write this book. I get to go to Hawaii. For those of you who might not know, actually, Mary was kind of a partner in the research process for this particular book because she was writing an article, right? You were writing an article? Was it?
Right, I was working on an article for Smithsonian Magazine.
And what was it on? What the heck was it on?
It was about kipukas, I believe, if I'm remembering that right, which are little, almost like islands created by when lava flows around a piece of land, either because it's a higher elevation or some other reason, but it goes around it. So this, they have this fire burning, the lava is just burning everything up. And you're left with this little, it's almost like an island. So species tend to break off. You have speciation happening in the same way you would with actual islands in the water. So it was a story about the kipukas on the Big Island. And so Gail and I were tromping around in the, looking at lava. Lava was flowing from Kilauea at that time, right?
Yeah, I think it was 2016, right? Okay, let's go back a little. Mary goes, I need to write this article. I know you're writing this book. I think that we should go research. You research, and Kilauea was flowing. And I knew that there was going to be a scene in which I wanted to write about the actual idea of a lava flow, and to actually see one which lasted months, right? And so it really was this kind of blessing that you kind of said, I think we should go. And I think we should just, I'll do my research, you'll do your research, we'll do research together, which is what we had done in this particular time. And so it was a lot of fun on top of the fact, we did the work that we needed to do, but it was also a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. We rented a car. We kind of trashed it. We don't need to get into that, but I remember because one of your characters ends up, he's the engineer on the sugar train, which takes the workers back and forth from the fields to the villages, and they had wasn't it a museum devoted?
We did. There is still the train museum. And they do have cars of the sugar trains that are still there that we were able to see when I was there. It's so hard when you're writing. I don't know if there's a big difference between researching for nonfiction or researching for fiction. But the problem for fiction is I see those trains, that we had seen. I see the lava that we had seen flowing. I take all that and then I think, but I can't really write about it up front. As fiction writers, the story has to be up front. The characters have to be up front. And what we do with all the research that we do is it takes a backseat. It becomes part of the landscape, but not in the forefront. And I think that was so interesting that we do it in some ways differently. I don't know how much the forefront takes as a nonfiction writer, but thinking about it, I think that for us, the storyline has to be in the front seat, or else it's so easy for the research to take over for us. Especially when you go to the place and you've seen everything and you think, I got to describe this down to the T. I got to say, and then you're thinking, but wait, your character is not feeling that when they're there. So you have to step back.
I think there's a danger, especially when you invest the time and you go somewhere. I think there's a tendency you have all this richness of material and you want to use it all. And sometimes you're just using a little smidgen, a dab here and there. And it's like, as a nonfiction writer, say going to an archive and spending 3 days with this material, and you feel like you put this time in and you have all of these facts, but that's not a reason to use them all. They have to really earn their presence in the book. They have to be a reason for you to put this fact in. And that sometimes it's hard to kind of let the rest of it go because you worked hard to get there,
Yeah, and that's, I think it's even harder. And that's the hard part about fiction in general, is the fact that you do all this work gathering all the material, and then you realize that 90% of it has to go away. But what it does for you is it gets in your head, and as it goes into the character, you realize that the characters experience that, and it can come through the characters. So in through the back door, but it means kind of another step. But I think that's the difference, a little bit of a difference in what we do with researching.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
it's
the 90% figure. I'd say when I go on a research trip and I take notes and I interview people, I probably end up using 10% in the end, you know, in terms of actual material that makes it into the book. There's just so much that you're absorbing and you don't really use, but
but it's the absorption that's the important thing, you know. Because it comes out in different ways, right? It comes out in the characters, it comes out in the way they think, you know, how they eat, what they eat, you know, all that.
It's necessary to go to the place and absorb all of that. I think it's necessary for the honesty of the words, and in your case, the characters. You know, and you just don't have the level of detail. And my feeling with writing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, is that detail is so important in just creating a truth, you know, a reality. Yeah.
Especially when you have so many characters, like in this particular book, you know, they all have to have their different realities and try to get it down. And so it's all of that. But it's the researching that brings it all to to making the characters feel real, right? So you don't feel that they're just stock characters,
right? And exactly. And is it Gail? I don't. You know a lot of fiction authors, novelists. Do most of them do this kind of research where you're actually traveling to somewhere? You're not just looking something up on the internet. You're going and you're talking to people and you're absorbing details. Is that fairly standard? I know nothing about fiction.
I think we're all different. You know, I think just like nonfiction writers might do things differently, fiction writers are all across the board. A lot of times I've never seen a place that I've written about until after the first draft is done. Then I go research. I have writer friends who research before they even begin writing.
So you'll write a draft and then you go and kind of
research. I'll research through book research, archive research, online research, you know, whatever research, just so I get a sense of place and sense of timing and all that. And then it goes into the book. I mean, that was the way with The Samurai's Garden, for instance. And the reason because of that is there were other things I was thinking about. And in a way, I was glad I never had gone back, because I think the Terumi in the book is not the same Terumi that I had written about back in the 20s, 30s. And, you know, so then that could hurt you, right? So that's why I didn't do it. And that's why every book is so different. But because we actually had a lava flowing at that time, you know, I mean, how many times do you get the chance to actually experience a lava flow?
Right. Right. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit about characters. In my work, it's completely different, obviously. I mean, what you managed to do to create characters who not only are, you know, physically different, the way they're described, the way you bring them to life and what they look like, but their voice, you know, just to read how they speak, they stand apart and are you know who they are, even if the name isn't written down, which is an amazing feat. Not all novelists do that well. And I wondered how do you do that? Do you walk around in your studio kind of like speaking in the voice of one of them, or do you base it on people that you know? Do you have characters based on people that you've met? How do you create these voices that come across in the dialogue?
Don't you feel that all writers are a little bit schizophrenic? We have all these voices in our heads kind of coming out. You know, I think I sometimes look at place as being a character.
Yeah.
You know, and once I find that place and where I'm going to put my characters in, they start to develop from that. It's like the seed. You know, I know it's going to be, Terumi in the Samurai's Garden. I know it's going to be Hilo and the plantations, and then I let the characters grow from that particular point.
Mhm.
But with these characters, I really approached this particular book like I was writing poetry. Why I say that is a lot of times when I write a book, I don't know what's going to happen before I begin it. I just start writing, and it could be in this particular case, it was place. I knew it was Hilo Town. I knew that there was going to be a character that was missing something, that he and somebody else that was coming back. So you see how I was starting with nothing.
Yeah.
Pretty much, right? Other than the character of place. And when I began finding things, it began coming together. The time, the plantations, what was happening, what brought him there, what brought the blended society together. Those were all the things I began with. And so then it means kind of getting your characters in your head and who's going to tell the story and what story they're telling. And I wanted a group of women to be in this book that reminded me of the group of women that I have in my life. And I think everybody has this kind of group of women who are their Hilo aunties. And that was something that came as I began writing. And I started with a male character. So I don't know how it kind of traversed its way into this whole group of women that became, in some ways, a large foundation of what this book was going to be. And I think it is because I'm at a certain age where I have a lot of good friends, including you, who I wanted to somehow showcase in a really indirect way. Aunts in my life, women in my life who have somehow added to my life.
Right. But are there individuals that are their mannerisms or how they speak or anything? Do you get that from people, from actual people in your life, or are they completely made up?
I never write about a specific person. They're always parts of people, or pieces of people. There's never a character in any of the books that I've written that have been a specific character that I know.
Women recognize themselves, and
they always recognize. They always think there's someone in the book, but they probably aren't in the book. But that's when you think you've written a character well enough that they feel that that's part of who they are. But it's everything. It's what fiction writers call significant details. You pick things out of things that you see in life. Way somebody, may touch the back of their head when they're thinking about something. The way a person's leg shakes when they're nervous. It's all those kind of details that go into the characters so that they become a hodgepodge of many people that or that you see. Sometimes I'm in a bookstore doing a reading and I see somebody in the front row and they're doing something that I think, oh, that'll go into a character someday. And it's all subconscious, but it kind of comes out.
Sure.
Yeah. I've had a lot of these Hilo aunties in my life. Not only because I come from a culture where aunties are very important. And they not necessarily have to be blood aunties. They're aunties because they're your mother's good friend, or you're this thing, or you're somebody's cousin, but they all become the idea of what an auntie is. That was something that I specifically wanted to write about when I wrote this book. I wanted to write about those relationships. And when you're in a small community, like Hilo Town would have been, and because they were very much structured so that one group could not interact with other groups up in the plantations. They kept the Filipinos away from the Japanese and the Chinese from the Japanese, and everybody was kind of on their own. And the plantations owners did it in a way to help themselves, because then they couldn't unite as a group to complain about anything.
Unionize,
and so, I found that all fascinating too, because in the end, it became this blended community that we see now.
So Gail, when you start with a place, which is sort of a character, this place and this feeling and a lot of detail. So you don't have an outline of the plot. Like you don't know what the characters are going to do and how they'll, do you dive in with no sense of where you're going? Because I mean, I do. In my book, I didn't know novelists did that.
Oh yeah, this novelist does that. You know, I mean, again, it's all different. I mean, I have friends. Okay, for instance, if you were writing a mystery novel,
Yeah,
you would have to plot it.
exactly.
Yeah, really pretty much scene by scene by scene, so that you knew what was going on, because you would have the killing or the murder or whatever, you know, you need to follow that. I also have fiction friends who aren't mystery writers who plot. I mean, I remember visiting a friend and going up to her attic study, and on her board on the wall, she had index cards, and every index card was a movement of what the character was going to do. And I was like flabbergasted, because I thought, I'm doing this all wrong. You know, I don't do this. I don't put, you know, like so-and-so does this now, or this happens next. I've always gone from one line to the next, one paragraph to the next, hoping that it builds on itself. You know, and it's easy to say it builds on itself, but what it really means is sometimes I don't get through half to 3/4 of a book before that light bulb goes on in my head, and I think, oh, that's what it's about.
Yeah, same
That's
here.
what I need to do. Then I have to go back and seed, and then I have to go back and rewrite. And so it's really this kind of one step forward, 2 steps back, you know, one step forward again. And that's kind of been my writing process throughout all the books.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, I mean, I write nonfiction, and I frequently, halfway through, I'll realize, oh, this is what this book is, this is what it's about, and this is what belongs in it. These things don't. These things I thought I was going to include, they don't belong, which it's not, I don't recommend that as a way to do a book. I waste a fair amount of time. I do research that doesn't end up in the book, but I don't know any other way to do it, but to dive in and immerse myself in a big pond and then whittle it down to a smaller puddle. And
But don't you think that? But don't you think don't you also feel that everybody has their own way of writing? And
yes.
you know, if we tried to do it a different way, we probably couldn't write anything.
Well, it's just why you know, people say, "Do you teach writing?" And I said, I don't. I think I would do people a disservice to teach them what I do. I think there's much better ways to do it. And I also think, like you said, I think everybody comes up with their own approach and their own system, and whatever works for you. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, you teach a lot. How do you?
Yeah, but you know, I mean, the whole thing is it's also this. Writing a book is kind of like a marriage. This is the way I approach it, right?
Yeah.
Because all the way through, there are times when I just want to divorce it. I just don't want to be there anymore. I just can't stand it anymore. It's too hard.
Yes.
It's not going forward. You know how this is, right?
Yeah. There's always a moment where I want to complete.
But you keep going for some reason. There's always that itch that keeps you going to find out what this is about.
Yes.
You know, so it's that. And I've always said to students, because yes, I've taught, is that we all do it differently. And there's no way for me as a teacher to say, if you do it this way, you'll write and finish a book. Because we know that so much of writing is just persevering, to keep doing it, to believe that you have something to say, that you hope you have the story to tell, that you have these great characters that hopefully somebody will want to read. You know, so it's all of that to make a book. And
it's not something anybody can, when you get to the point where you want to quit and get the divorce, there's not really anyone who can help you out of that. I remember turning to my editor at that point saying, I've got 3/4 of it and I don't know what I'm doing. Could you take a look? And she said, Mary, I'd rather just look at it when you're done. And I remember thinking, well, hey,
It may never be done. You're the editor. You're supposed to be talking.
But in the end, I think, I mean, you have it. You're just soaking in it, and you know everything that's there, and you know what the answer is. You just don't know it yet, and you just have to go through. I think you go through that period of just hopelessness.
No, I mean, I think it's very true. I think, people have always asked, what do you do when you hit a wall?
Yeah.
When you don't know what you're doing anymore, which happens a lot with me. I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, what are they doing? And I think that what you do is, and it's sometimes hard because you think if you sit there, that you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
There's that stubbornness of being a writer, and you want to figure it out because you've done it before, you could do it again. But I think the best thing to do is actually walk away for a little while. Yeah. To do something else. To go for a walk, go out and eat when you could go out and eat. I like watching movies because I like visually seeing a story told. And because you can see scene by scene when you're seeing a story told. Right. It's the fiction is there. Yeah. It's just trying to see how they've done it. And a lot of times, the next morning when I turn on the computer again and I go back and read what I had written the day before, then I move forward again, it starts working again. So sometimes I think you can write yourself into a cubby hole where you can't get out of. Mm-hmm. And that's when you need to just leave it. And then come back to it the next day. Yeah. I every book I've done, and my husband reminds me of this every time I hit that point where I want to quit. He goes, I'm just going to remind you, you do reach this point in every book. And later, everything's fine. Just letting you know. So in other words, he's saying it's part of the process. And I do believe it is part of the process. I mean, we have to hit times when we just feel a little bit lost in order kind of to regroup and go forward. So I do believe it is. And it doesn't matter if it's fiction or nonfiction. I think it's when you sit down to write an ongoing piece of work that it takes that kind of energy that sometimes you feel you lose. I mean, I can't even begin to think about another book, in the sense that what it's going to take to begin at the beginning again.
That's part of the process too. I'm done. I'll never do this ever again.
We talk about that all the time.
Like, oh, I know what I want to do. This would be really fun. Because I don't want to emphasize the negative too much because it is really fun. I mean, isn't it? I mean, you love what you do.
I mean, I think when it comes together, when you've written that perfect line, and you sat there for 8 hours, but you wrote that perfect line. Yes. I actually think to myself, now I can have a glass of wine because I wrote a perfect line, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes there's pages, sometimes it's a paragraph, and I think you can hold yourself to whatever you're going to do each day. That as long as it moves forward is what. Yeah.
There's a kind of satisfaction that if you didn't have the struggle, you wouldn't have that kind of satisfaction
at the end.
So I'm not going to ever be able to retire because I wouldn't have that. I don't know what I would do. It would be peaceful and bland. I don't know. Maybe that would be good.
Well, we could keep doing research trips.
We just never write them up. Just go, take notes, and never write it up. That does sound kind of good. Speaking of which, I wanted to talk to you about Nagaland. Nagaland. This is a place Gail mentioned. I don't even know why were you mentioning Nagaland, but I hadn't heard of it, and then I went, Nagaland. What is that? And it's this state in the extreme northeast of India, and I was just like, I've got to go there. I managed to place a story again with Smithsonian, and we went there. What were you? Oh, you were working.
I hope nobody from the Smithsonian is watching this. Really. On the side, when I can't write, I run a small grassroots nonprofit called Waterbridge Outreach Books and Water. And actually, Mary is very much a part of it. So it's a nice segue. And this was early on. We didn't know what we were doing. This was Nagaland. And it's way out there in India. And we were...
Close to, Myanmar, yeah.
Yeah, and what Waterbridge does is we've actually expanded and we donate books and literacy materials. We do water and sanitation projects in communities and villages in developing nations. And Nagaland was one of the places where we were doing some schoolwork out in the rural. But we had never been there, and Mary had to do this article, and met, and we actually went and visited Nagaland, and it was fascinating because I had never known that there was this place there.
It's a culture very distinct from what surrounds it in
India. Yeah,
culturally a little bit more like Myanmar, and there's a movement for independence. I don't know. I haven't really checked in lately, but what I wanted to ask is, will we be seeing a novel that's set in Nagaland?
Nagaland. That would be a really wonderful novel, but it just seems a tiny bit out of my reach right now. I think maybe I'd have to go back and research, which wouldn't be a bad thing.
That wouldn't be a bad thing at all.
Yeah. They're wonderful people.
Yeah.
That we had met, and it's culturally, it was a beautiful place because it's all on the side of a mountain. Mm-hmm. It's much like, other areas that you would think in Italy when you see, villages that are on the mountains. What's fortunate about being with Waterbridge is that it has lent itself to a lot of material beyond the fact that we're able to do things, for other people. Right. But yeah, Nagaland definitely is one. And we're doing work in Cambodia now. Maybe Cambodia before Nagaland.
Yeah. I remember we were in a Dalit community as well, putting in a well. Well, we weren't putting in the well, but and that was another. I remember you saying that was also, that village had made you think about that as a setting as well.
Yeah, I feel very fortunate because of all these travels and all the places that we've gone to and I've gone to. Will it ever find its way into a book? I have no idea. I'm like you. When I finish a book, I think, I don't know if there's another book.
I say that all the time.
Yeah. But, I think with us, part of the ways I do actually find books is during the time I'm writing a book, like The Color Air, I'm researching all about Hawaii, and then I stumble upon something that has nothing to do with the book itself. But it's this great idea for another book. And I think, I wonder if I could write this book. And I wonder if that happens with you when you're doing that. You're researching, and then you think, this would be a great book.
Yeah, there are often, twice there have been things I stumbled onto that didn't quite fit. And I tried putting them kind of in a footnote. And then I realized I'm going to take back the footnote because I think this is going to be part of another book. And that's happened a couple of times where doing research for one book, you find something that's fascinating. It just doesn't, you can't, I always try to shoehorn it in anyway. Even if it doesn't.
I've done that. I did it with the Samurai's Garden because I was researching and I found out about those women who were pearl divers, who could dive into the ocean and hold their breath for how many, a minute or whatever it was, in order to get to the pearls, bring them up, while the men sat on the beach watching, and I thought, wouldn't that be a great book? So instead, it becomes one of the stories that one of the characters tells in the Samurai Garden. So, I think those are all those nuggets that you find when you research. And that's the beauty of researching too. It's not only that you find out about what you're working on, but you find out about things that you could work on.
Yeah. The best ideas come from being somewhere, talking to someone, or seeing something. It's rarely do I find something on the internet, even though everything is on the internet. Somehow the things that you end up following along with are things that you experienced for some reason. I don't know. I think, Gail, I think we need to, it's about 6:45, so we should take some questions if Max is still out there. Is Max
Yeah, I'm
out?
out here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Fantastic. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first question. And it is, Gail, what started this book? Was it the voice of a particular character? If so, which one?
Oh, good question. Well, what started this book was what I had answered with Mary earlier, was the fact that I was interested in the whole idea of the splendid society that the Hawaiian Islands have become and how they became that. So it went back to that part with the plantations and bringing them all in. And then I thought, what if somebody was away for a while and come back to this? What would it be like? What would happen? And I think with every book, it's been this kind of weird curiosity that gets a writer writing, especially fictional books, because they're making it all up. You have to feel excited about a certain thing, and you have to want to answer questions. And I think a lot of it had to do with those questions of what brought all these people here, and what if somebody came back, and what if there was a secret being kept from this person who's coming back. So, you see how it all kind of builds slowly and really paragraph by paragraph in this particular sense. But because the place gave me a sense of character from the get-go, it kind of laid the groundwork for me, and everything else followed. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, you definitely did. Yeah. All right, so we only have one more question, and it's actually for both of you. And the question is, what books have you both been reading this summer?
Oh, gosh. What have I been reading this summer? That always, Gail, you go first. I have to remember.
This is the problem. We start forgetting it. I've spent so much time working on the book and then rewriting with my editor that I was almost afraid to read too much, but I do tend to read. I mean, I know writers who will not read while they're writing a book because they're always afraid that somehow, at least in the fiction world, that they may borrow something or something might translate over. But I've always felt differently. So a lot of times when I'm writing a book, I reread books that somehow inspired me because they've done something where I thought, how did they do that? And one of the books that I've read several times was The Shipping News. I didn't do it for this particular book.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I just love the way she had the voices. And so that was it. Yeah. But what I did was I began stacking up books that I wasn't able to read because I was writing at the time. So I'm probably reading a lot of books that a lot of the audience has already read because I'm going backwards in some ways. But some of the books that I really enjoyed lately has been Olive Again by Elizabeth Strout. I thought it was a really good, sequel. Do you call it sequel to Ella Kittredge?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I thought it really worked well. We talk about books.
I know. Yeah.
Mary,
I just my Goodreads because I have my memory is shot. Okay, so I just finished yesterday. Already forgot. John Mooallem's book, This Is Chance, about which is nonfiction about the Great Alaska Quake, but follows this one woman who stayed on the radio for like 72 hours straight. Anyway, it was a 9-point-something devastating earthquake, although not that many people died. But anyway, it was a really good book. Before that, a Colson Whitehead book called Apex Hides the Hurt, which I liked a lot.
I like the Railroad one from Colson Whitehead. I'd like to read The Nickel Boys, which I haven't read yet.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book that somehow landed, on the pile that I didn't realize by Donna Tartt called The Little Friend. And I had problems with the Goldfinch. I couldn't get into it, but I do love this book. I've only started it. I thought the prologue or her beginning is just fabulous. So that's actually what I'm reading now. It's one of those. She writes only big books. So
yeah, right. I read earlier this summer the Splendid and the Vile, Eric Larson's new one. I always read whatever Eric Larson.
And
Right?
he's really good.
He's so good. He's just anyway. The Splendid and the Vile is about Churchill and his immediate circle during the Blitz, and it's amazing. It's an amazing book. What else did I read? Oh, Blood Will Out. Yeah, Walter Kern, really good, but it's not new. Oh, here's one I love: Why Fish Don't Exist. Why Fish Don't Exist is by Lulu Miller, who she used to be on Radio Lab. She does a podcast called Invisibility? Anyway, she's fabulous. And the book is impossible to describe. It's personal, but it's also researched. It's an amazing plot. It's historical. It landed on my desk. It was, someone asking for a blurb, and I started reading it, and I couldn't put it down. It was really so that was earlier. I think that was just before COVID.
Yeah, and I think a book that I just finished from an author that I love is Geraldine Brooks. And again, my head is going. The story of a book or something like that. She's a wonderful writer. Anyway, who's done things with research that you cannot believe.
Yeah.
So, a lot of them are current. I just finished a manuscript by a friend of mine. That's going to be a terrific book. That's going to come out in, I don't know, next year or whatnot. So a lot of things go back and forth. And a lot of things that we read are manuscripts of friends, that send us things ahead of time, things that we have to blurb.
Right. Yeah. I just did an event, or if you're doing an event like this with somebody, I did.
He has to read mine.
I mean, I had already read The Color of Air, so I was done. I didn't have to do anything for this except show up. I just read a 600-page zombie novel for that same reason. I was doing an event with Daniel Krauss, who he's Guillermo del Toro's writing partner, and I've never read a zombie book, but it's amazing. It's him, but it's George Romero, who's dead. So basically, George Romero is writing from the grave in a sense, which is kind of trippy. But the estate of George Romero turned over a partially finished manuscript to Daniel Krauss, who spent a long time finishing it, doing extra research, and it's a hell of a read, really. I was a little, 600 pages zombie novel was not. I mean, I didn't expect to.
What you thought would be.
Yeah, but he's an amazing writer, and it's a page turner.
Well, that's the whole thing. It doesn't matter the length of the book, right? It's just the story.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I've been reading. Thank goodness for Goodreads. I wouldn't. I just can't hold the books in my head. I finish them and then, whoop, they're gone. The titles, anyway.
All right. Awesome. So that was all of the questions. So I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Gail and Mary, both, for that incredible talk. Again, if you'd like to support our bookstore and Gail, you can go ahead and purchase her book by clicking that green button below. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And again, thank you so much, Gail and Mary.
Thanks, Max.
Thank you. Thanks, Max. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
Have a good
thanks
night.
for being here. All, what is it, 64 people? Woo! Fantastic.